Okay, the first thing that we are going to do is we have to have a programming language in our belt. So, in order to understand anything, in order to make computers understand something, the first thing that you have to do is you have to make the machines understand some things. Because otherwise, like, how are we able to communicate with the machines? There is no way except we must know a language. So, why have we actually selected this language Python? So, what is the thing between this? Why have we selected this? Why Python? Because there are so many languages. We could have chosen C, C++, probably Java, some other language. But in machine learning, this is the most widely used language. That's the first thing. This is most widely used language within the industry as well. If you go to some industries and there you will see the most popular language that people are using is Python. And the second thing is this is just like plain English. Plain English. By that I mean it's very easy to learn. If some of you people have already learned C or C++, it's really great. So the best thing you can do is just take those programming concepts and write somehow them in the plain English, and then you'll be able to see how easy this is. So it's easy, it's widely available. And the other thing that there are a lot of packages. There are a lot of packages which are, for example, you might have heard about NumPy, which is used in machine learning, deep learning. There is Pandas, which is used for usually reading of these files and then writing out the files on some other file systems. Then we have Matplotlib. Then there are Seaborn. They are basically used for plotting things if you want to plot some graphs and stuff like that. So a lot of packages are there, like PyTorch is there, which is used in deep learning. Then we have TensorFlow, which came from Facebook actually. So it has a huge library support as well. And the other thing is it is a generic language if you see it. So for example, if you learn Python, it means that you can do other things with the Python as well. ऐसा नहीं है कि तुम सिर्फ उसी चीज़ पे restricted होंगे. You will be able to do much more things if you know Python language. So for example, there is a famous language which is sometimes used, that's called R. It usually is used when we are dealing with statistics. So this language, if you learn that, probably it will help you in performing some good tasks on machine learning things on some data, but it is not a general purpose language. So this is the motto, that why are we using Python. Let's first go like what is the meaning of Python. So basically, if you differentiate languages, there are low level languages, LL, and there are high level languages. So low level language is like binary. If you have to write the code, because as you know, machines and these computers, they understand just ones and zeros. That is, if there is a if current is if there is a high voltage or there is less voltage. So based on that, we write programs. In the first generation computers, if you see that we had punch cards, things like that, we have to punch holes in them. Holes means a 1, and if there is not a hole, that means 0. So those languages were called as binary, and you have to write everything in ones and zeros, and you have to get instructions like that, and machines can directly understand those ones and zeros, and this is not readable to humans in a particular form, so you will have to have, for example, translate this in some way. But afterwards it was very difficult to write programs in this language. Then we came on assembly language. Assembly was somewhat understandable to humans, but it was still very close to binary, so it was not human readable like perfect. If you, for example, see if somebody has worked in assembly, you write move, for example, register 1, register 2, like this, and then you can write this add what are the contents in R2 and R1, things like that. So this language is also some sort of unreadable to humans. So these languages are called low level language, the language which are near to the hardware. So when you write that, there is no need of such huge convergence. Then there are high level language. High level language which are human readable, For example, if you take language C, if you write a function there, printf basically means you're going to print something, that it is some sort of like closer to humans and humans can understand it. But the problem we have with high level language, we have to translate them into the machine code. This binary is actually called machine code. We have to make the change in the code, manipulate the code in such a way so that machine understands it. So there are compilers and interpreters and a thing like involved in that which do these tasks. So every line of code, it goes into that phase. If you have read about compilers, so when you write a single line of code, what happens there is the first thing that happens is it will go, for example, to some assembler to get into convert into assembly. Then we have other compilers and interpreters that change it into binary. So if you see this Python, the first thing is it's a high level language. Here I mentioned it, Python is a high level language. That means it's closer to humans. And naturally a question arises, if it's a high level language, then we need to translate so that machines can understand it. If you are writing some code, so you have to translate it to actually the machine code. So everything that I told is, I can write it here. So when you have a high level language, you need to convert it into machine code. Is it visible? I'll write it here. Everything that is written in high level language, it has to be converted, and the conversion has to be done in machine code, because computer only understands machine code. You cannot expect a machine will understand whatever I spit it out. So in between there is a whole process going on in this. So mostly they are done by compilers or interpreters. So people who have done their bachelor's, they might have a subject compiler design, how these compilers are designed. So in the compilers there are a lot of phases. There's a phase like lexical analysis, then we have semantic analysis, then there is some formation of past and things like. I don't want to go into those details, but just to make you understand that high level language are to be converted into machine code, and in between there's a stage called as compilation or interpretation. So this Python is a high level language, and it's an interpreter based language. If you see it right here, I mentioned it is an interpreter based language. And I also told you what is the meaning of the general purpose as well. So it can be used for more purpose than one. That we'll see in applications, the applications that a Python has. First thing is it's a high level language. Then it is an interpreter based language. By interpreter I mean like we need not to go into depth what an interpreter is, what a compiler is, because it will again take whole of the lecture. So there are actually subjects based on the compilers and interpreters. Like in short, I'll say compiler, there is a basic difference between a compiler and an interpreter. Compiler takes the whole code and tries to process it in one go. If you see compilers, they take the whole code and they try to process it. What interpreters do is they'll take code line by line. Okay, the basic difference, this is the basic difference. So there can be technical differences which I don't want to develop into, because otherwise we'll take whole of the time with compilers and interpreters. Just remember this basic difference. Compilers, when they look at the code, when they have to translate any code, so what they do is they'll take the whole code and try to process it in the one go, and then they'll find the errors and or do some processing, whatever they want to do. But interpreters, they'll do it line by line. For example, if you have usually programs are written in lines, so the first line will be checked by the interpreter, then second line, then if there is an error in fourth line, if first three lines are okay, the execution of the first three lines will happen. But if you look in the in this Python, it actually uses a compiler as well. Like technically speaking, you might not find those in the online blogs that usually people write that Python is an interpreter based language, but it's actually interpiler based language. There is a compiler. Python has the compiler as well, because as I said that in this conversion of high level language to machine code, so there are different steps involved, like lexical analysis there. I said there is a formation of parse tree and things like that. So for one of the phases, actually Python uses a compiler. That's for the syntax analysis. Oh, I'm writing on the picture. Syntax analysis. I don't want to go into the nitty-gritty details what the things are, but when you write some wrong syntax in a language, without involvement of the interpreter, Python will detect this syntax error. So if somebody says what is the funda of the Python language, so you can say it is basically use a compiler as well as interpreter. But compiler is just used in one stage in the syntax, when there is syntax analysis of the phase. Okay, so this language was actually created by Guido van Rossum in 1991. So he was a mathematician. Okay, if there were so many languages, why did he create a new language like Python? So every language, every computer language has a design philosophy behind it. As he was a mathematician, he wanted the language to be simple, to be easy to read, and when somebody wants to code in it, it should be simple. And if you see difference between C and C++, there is a lot of gap. But if you compare Python with these languages like C, C++, Java, you will find that Python code is really easy to read. Okay. So that's what his philosophy. His philosophy was that I should make this language easy to read and easy to code in. And the second thing, he's a mathematician, so he used some mathematical principles to use that. And right now, I think currently we are at the version of Python, I think 3.10. We have the Python, and you can check that as well. So what are the applications of Python? I'll just go over briefly over them because I want to go into the meat of the lecture today. I don't want you to bore with the details of what Python is, because that you can read it online. Applications of Python, you can use Python in web development. For example, as you might be, some of you are interested in web development, so there you have different frameworks which are based on Python, like Django and stuff like that. So there is the base thing there is it uses Python in the backend. And then if you see the best use cases is in the machine learning part. So you will use machine learning, for deep learning you will mostly use the Python language where you will code in. So again, then we have to create graphical user interface for development environment. As I said, web for frameworks like Django, which are used by YouTube, Instagram, and Dropbox, they also use Python. If somebody is interested in web scraping, by web scraping I mean, for example, if you have to automate a thing, you want to actually I had to go home recently. So what I had, the task in hand was I had to compare flight prices. For that I had to go to different websites to see the prices. So what I did is I wrote a program for web scraping. So I could go on those websites automatically. I wrote a Python script actually by using the Selenium. It's a web scraper. So what I did is I wrote a program so that it retrieves the prices of the flights, and then it shows which of the websites shows the cheapest price among those. So you can do web scraping by using Python. Then there are test frameworks. There are a lot of things that you can do with the Python, because it has a very strong contributors. So they usually give a lot of people give a lot of feedbacks, and they keep the language updated. So it's used in scientific computation, multimedia applications, and text processing, and other multiple of domains. So I'm saying like this language is cornerstone for tech giants like Google, Amazon, Facebook, Instagram, Dropbox, Uber, and many more. I don't think there is a company which does not speak Python. Right now, when I'm working, I'm also mostly working in Python. I also work in some low-level language, but most of the time I work in this Python. So I spoke with this. What is the meaning of this interpreter-based language? So you can just go through these notes if somebody wants to see that. And then platform independent. It's also platform independent. That means that if I write my code on one machine, so I can execute it on other machines as well. For example, I have the Linux machine with me. So if I write the code in Linux machine, I'll be able to run this code in Windows, Macintosh, Solaris, and other operating systems which are there, and in the other hardware as well. So it's platform independent. Some languages are there which are not platform. For example, if you take assembly, if you write that code on my machine, it won't run on another machine. So that's what I mean by platform independence. Then it is free and open source. By open source, I mean that you can also contribute the language. You can then, for example, you can. Okay, some people are joining. So I'm saying that by free source and by free and open source, I mean you can use this language without any cost. And the other thing is that you can suggest changes to the code, and if you want something can be better done in other way, so you can just request the contributors to like pull these changes, and it is a redistributable thing. That there is no close. For example, if you see Microsoft Office, that is actually closed source. They don't give source code, but Python source code is available at python.org. Python.org. So you can check Python's documentation over there. As I said, it's a high-level language. It's very simple. By simple, I mean that you can easily read it, easily write it, and then it's embeddable. By embeddable, I mean you can easily use the Python code in some. For example, if you are coding some load device drivers, while you use C++ as your main language, but you want a certain script of Python to run as well. So you can embed this code. You can embed the code of Python into C++, Java, and things like that. It's also robust. By robust, I mean you have a beautiful memory management system in that, and it's highly reliable and it's very stable. For example, if you write a code in C, it sometimes crashes because it's really closed hardware, because there is a concept of pointers and things like that. And as I said, it's a rich library support, which I mentioned earlier. We have libraries that we use in machine learning. So there is a lot of things. So first topic that we are going to deal with is what are Python keywords. So I just gave an overview of what Python is. The Python, only thing the Python has, it's really slow than other language. C is really fast than it. So C and C++, I think they are the fastest language that we have, except for the assembly and binary. So Python is slow, but now our hardware is so fast that we don't feel the pace basically. So that's why most of the people, they use this Python as their language, because it's easy to read, easy to code in the Python, and easy to maintain, and there is a lot of support available as well. So if you search even on the web, if there is an error you are getting with your program, you can search, and then you will get the solutions online easily, because there is a lot of people out there who are using the language. It's like, for example, if you have to buy a car, you will buy that car for which the servicing is easy. You won't buy, for example, Mercedes, because if you buy Mercedes and if there is a problem with Mercedes, then very less people will be able to fix that. So that's how Python is. Python is like a language where a lot of support is present. Okay.